In Tyler Perry's I Can Do Bad All By Myself movie and play, there's a darker truth beneath the gospel songs and redemption story.
Everyone rightly blames the predators. They are the ones ultimately responsible for the devastation they leave behind. But what about the ones who knew about the violations and did nothing?
They may be victims too, but there's something to consider.
They let generations of pain thrive under their silence. This is the conversation that none of us want to have, but we need to talk about it.
I'm Heit.
And I'm Cheri.
And you've discovered Axiom Amnesia.
We want to thank all of the supporters who helped to make this video possible. If you want your name to appear alongside these contributors, make a one-time donation via Cash App, or you can head on over to patreon.com/axiomamnesia to enjoy all of the benefits of becoming a monthly subscriber. There are going to be spoilers, so if you have not seen I Can Do Bad All By Myself, the play and the movie, it'll be spoiled for you in this discussion. But we hope you've seen it because we've done multiple videos on both the movie and the play. So those are linked below in the description if you've missed any one of them. So for context, let's talk about how we even decided that this needs to be a discussion point. There were certain comments that happened in the videos that we did on the movie as well as the play that kind of got us thinking. And there were two comments in particular that really sparked this video. So the first comment was on the video about the 2009 movie, I Can Do Bad All By Myself, the one starring Taraji P. Henson. And so Chaos Spy said, "The grandma is the true villain. Chances are Lee got to the sister. Lee is the one that April said, had done things to her as a child that was the mother's boyfriend, right? So chances are Lee got to the sister before getting to April, but they tried to cope differently." Then Darkstalker Lover 101 said, "That's what I think too. That's why April, aside from not talking to her, but also the reason why she has that I don't care about anyone or anything attitude to her from the beginning of the movie. It's due to trauma." So that was the first comment. And then the second comment that got us thinking was on the first video about the play. And Shaquille Anderson said, "What kills me about Madea is for her to be so gangster. She sure lets a lot of atrocities happen to the people in her family. Where was she when these kids were being abused? Women getting beat, etc. But all the performative BS with the gun. She crashes out for trivial reasons, but never seems to prevent the real issues." So, I had some kind of reactions when I first saw it. Did you, when you saw these comments, like, wait a minute, and you and I kind of talked a little bit about it at the time. But obviously we need to talk further about this. So that's the basis for everything that we're talking about. We are going to do a quick short summary of the film. But first, if you're watching this, chances are Tyler Perry has you hooked. Whether you love his films, love to hate them, or just can't resist them as guilty pleasures. But here is what you might not know. We've already gone deep into Tyler Perry land. We've got the entire playlist, multiples of them, breaking down his stories, his characters, and all the drama that you can't stop talking about. So don't miss out. Hit the description for links to the ultimate Why Did I Get Married playlist and the ultimate Tyler Perry playlist. Trust me, you'll want to binge these and share them with your friends. So for a short summary of the film, here's what happened in the movie. We're not going to do a short summary of the play, though. So April is this self-centered nightclub singer living a life of detachment and alcohol. And her world is disrupted when her late sister's 3 children, Jennifer, Manny, and Byron, are caught breaking into Madea's house. With their grandmother missing, but later discovered deceased, Madea brings the children to April's doorstep, forcing her to confront both her responsibility and her trauma. As the film unfolds, April's hardened heart begins to thaw under the influence of Sandino, a kind immigrant who challenges her selfishness and awakens her humanity. Yet, the true heart of the story lies in Jennifer's fear of April's boyfriend, Randy, whose predatory behavior mirrors the abuse April herself suffered as a child. The film's emotional climax reveals a painful generational truth. April's mother knew and also let her know that she didn't believe her when she told her what happened when April told her what happened. Thus, she did nothing. Now, did Madea, April's grandmother, also know and then turn a blind eye? Through this revelation, there is a subtle indictment of the older women of the family, exposing how silence and denial sustain cycles of abuse. I Can Do Bad All By Myself becomes this presentation of this inherited pain and whether true redemption is possible or not when people who should have protected you choose not to. So that's what happened in the movie, right?
Want us to cover your favorite movie ASAP? A one-time contribution of just $50 or more to Axiom Amnesia gets you a deep dive on demand, a 30-minute discussion on any film you choose.
It's easy. Step 1, send $50 via our website, axiom.app, where you can pay via card, Apple Pay, or you can pay directly via Cash App at $Axiom Amnesia. See the links below. Step 2, tell us your movie, email, the name you want to appear on screen, and what kind of deep dive you want. General, a specific character, a particular aspect of the film, etc. Step 3, watch your deep dive on demand with your name listed as executive producer.
Lock in your deep dive on demand today and hurry. Spots are limited.
This offer is not valid for filmmakers or distributors. Subject to availability and terms apply. And let's get to talking about these comments. So the first comment we're going to discuss is the comment that was made by Chaos Spy. And that was the comment, that the grandma talking about April's mother, right? Because she's the grandmother to the children that April has to care for. The grandma is the true villain. And chances are that Lee got to the sister first. Now, for those of you who don't know, April's sister, even though she's deceased at the time of the film, had these 3 kids and she was drug addicted. And, in the film it's revealed that she even sold the daughter to somebody for, or tried to, sell the daughter to somebody for drugs. So, clearly the kids were in a desperate situation. And that's when April's mother, their grandmother, stepped in. But, April wasn't trying to, be part of that. And of course, her relationship with her own mother was very tense because, she told her mother that someone the mother had around the children was doing something. And the mother said that she did not believe her. So that's where, we're getting these comments. Now, first of all, just to say, like, the true villain, I want to say that I interpret that because we hear people say that all the time, not as to say that anybody else who actually did the thing was not responsible. Like, that's not to say Lee wasn't responsible or Randy wasn't responsible for their actions in this movie, but simply to say that here's somebody else who needs to be indicted that nobody's paying attention to. And in this case, they're pointing out, April's dead mother and Madea. Well, not pointing out Madea, but somebody brought out Madea. So what are your thoughts on this? The grandma is the real villain.
It doesn't matter but my interpretation, I think, of that matters.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what is your interpretation?
You say the real, you're suggesting that others you may have thought are that or not. And then what makes a villain, right? You got to know what a villain is and why would you call a character a villain, right, in a film, and suggesting that the other one who may have been thought a villain ain't the villain, right? Because every film doesn't have a villain, too.
Right.
And,
hopefully Chaos Spy will see this and will be able to jump in the comments,
the antagonist, right? Mm-hmm. And you may have a villain and the antagonist may be the villain, too.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I don't think it's also that nobody thought anything of the grandmother because people did think of the grandmother, but the movie isn't about the grandmother. The grandmother's not even in the movie, so the grandmother is basically not even a character in the movie.
Right.
To even be a villain or antagonist or anything. And I'm pretty sure everybody who saw it was like, yeah, the grandmother has some culpability and probably done some things wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
But after all I seen in the movie, I think the real villain, if there is one, would be the one who we saw committing the evil acts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think now listen, I hope that what that means is that that's a given going into the conversation. But I just think it's the nuance of, how now everybody,
you
it's
always got to point out who is the true whatever, right?
Yeah, that's the nuance of 2025 conversations.
And I think that's the point of it is to do that. To say, you were wrong about this, this is the real thing, right? But there's a difference in actual thoughts versus clickbait and titles, right? Because someone who's making a comment, I think that they are being genuine in what they think of the idea.
Okay,
but
all right.
People who let's say may make a video or something, or
may have a title
have
that
clickbait or click farming, whatever they're doing now, may just say that for the reaction from people, right? Which is different.
Right. So how I responded was, when I read this comment initially, I was like, first of all, I was just kind of like, we have to get away from the repetition of just
repeating
the common tropes, right? Because cliches. I think that, and cliches, because that does take away from the depth of the conversation. But, I'm certainly not indicting Chaos Spy for that, because I think the point was to say less. I hope the point was, let's look at the grandma. Let's talk about that. So that's why I want to talk about it. But I don't want to suppose exactly what was meant, but by the comment, that's how I took it. But then the true villain, I definitely agree with you on that, because, we're at a point in time where everybody wants to make everything not what it seems, right? Or what we thought it was. You're wrong. This is the way, this is how we should have been looking at it all along. And we know a little bit about that because, we have fan theories that have gone viral that people now repeat today that they don't even know started with us, right? Namely the one on Menace to Society and Kane and O-Dog, being alter egos. Well, O-Dog being alter ego, right?
But you know how I feel about the let's talk about, or this should be talked about, instead of saying that, do it, right? Like the Alicia Keys song that I hate. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. But you never talked about it.
Right. Okay. So to do to kind of add on to that, I liked that Chaos Spy brought it up. I don't want to suppose what Chaos Spy meant other than what was said here. So what I'll say is, the way I take that is, if you believe that the grandmother is the true villain, like true to those words, as opposed to the way we're using that phrase now to just highlight somebody that people aren't probably paying attention to. If you really think the grandmother is that, then I think you're completely wrong. The grandmother is no way that the person who didn't commit the offense is the true villain, unless that person is the orchestrator of the committing of the offense. For instance, if that person, like if somebody paid somebody to go do something to somebody else, of course they are the true villain. They are participating, right? The other person is acting on their behalf. There is no way that the grandmother was like, yes, go do this to my daughter. And even if you want to point out April's sister who attempted to sell her daughter, knowing what could have happened, or if we look at the play, what Mei Lee's mother, what Mei Lee says that her mother did, which was for drugs, let somebody come in and do stuff to her, right? At the age of 13. Even then, we have to question and say, what is the influence of the drugs and her being in the illness, and how we choose to indict her in those moments. But definitely the person who did it is the true villain. Definitely the person who did it is the true villain. There's no way around that. But I do think we do need to talk about any responsibility that the people who are aware or become aware, choose not to believe or don't believe, have in the pain and suffering of the victims, especially these children. So I think that's, kind of it for me, on that. But I do like the idea.
But so if the person isn't even there, right? Or let's say somebody is mentioned in a work, then they're not there. It's just like with all of this, because we know these are Christian movies, we can say the devil is the true villain. So then it all comes down from that. Right. Well, so it don't matter who the orchestrator is. Yeah. Right. Necessarily. But like, let's say if you have something with like something about a dictator, and then you have the foot soldiers who go in and act the things. Are they the villains or are they antagonists, right? Who are working on behalf of the villain, if the villain is actually
or both, right?
Yeah. So, but one wouldn't be the true villain. It would still end up being, maybe there's two villains.
There's multiple villains. Like, look, because on the most basic level, forget textbook definitions and all that. On the basic level, I think that most of us would just translate villain to just being, you're the bad guy. That's the bad guy, right? I mean, when we watched cartoons, the villain was the bad guy. So on the most basic level, when people say that, they're saying that this person is the bad guy or one of the bad guys. And
yeah, but you can't have that many bad guys, right? Like in the Matrix, you have the Smiths, right? Agent Smith. And then you have the machines. right?
Yeah, but I mean, okay, so in the real world, I think that the agents of the bad guy are bad guys too, right? Whether, if they're the arm of the
but that don't make them the villain.
Well,
you know what I'm saying? Like,
I know what you're saying. What I'm saying
like,
is the casual use of the word, and that anybody who's acting on behalf of bad and is the bad guy and could be interpreted as a villain.
Yeah, a lot of times I think of it, I guess sometimes, in terms of analyzing the film or the work we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, even if, you know how people used to term plot now, if they say something about the plot, then I'm thinking about the plot of the film, not with this other interpretation of
okay, so in this film, plot. What I'm saying is people who don't like what April's mother did in not believing her view her as a bad person. And but the complexities of what we talked about, which I really liked that was pointed out, was that even though April's mother is not on the camera, she's a round character because she had things that she did that were very noble, like taking those kids and trying to take care of them and doing her best. And she's going back and forth to work and died on the bus and everything, trying to take care of these kids. But she made some mistakes and some different things went on in her life. And even if it wasn't a quote unquote mistake, because we can talk all day long about whether you choose to believe your child or if it's a choice or not, or what you choose to do in that situation. But the point is, she clearly had good things in her corner, but then there were also things that were not good with regard to the grandchildren and how she did her own children, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, but then that would just make the statement not even required, because why do I need to say the grandmother is a bad person?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, there would be no need to bring it up to begin with, unless you're saying something very specific.
So do you think that, go to the comments, you guys, do you think that the grandmother, first of all, do you think the grandmother was the true villain? Is she really the one everything is that all the problems that come from the grandmother's choices and decisions, and she really is the bad guy? Now, here's another angle on that. If the grandmother didn't have Lee up in her house and wasn't dealing with Lee in this way in the first place, and didn't continue probably to deal with Lee, then her two daughters would never have been victimized. Right. Mm-hmm. So like, there's a difference in things happening that you know, like that you didn't know, but then you continuing down a path that potentially is destructive to children who don't get to determine. You know, if you're a grown adult, you can kind of, to some degree, decide what you want to do, what you want to do. When you're a child, you're at the mercy of the people taking care of you. You know, so there is that indictment. And I do think that, look, people have to deal with a lot of situations where they are not in control, and things that happen that they spend a lifetime trying to get over that happen to them as children. And we can't ignore that. But then what about this? Because we talked about this a lot with regard to the R. Kelly trial when all of that was going on, because, you know, he was allegedly a victim himself of many of the types of things going on that he was alleged to have done and was found guilty of having done. Right. And so my question becomes, all right, what if at what point are you, like, if let's say the grandmother was a victim, we don't know this for sure, but let's say the grandmother was a victim.
She was a victim of something.
In the play, we have a situation where May Lee was the victim, and where she didn't have sympathy for her own daughter who became a victim. Basically, it was like a generational cycle. The man that your mama brought around did something to you, and you done brought men around that you chasing, and they did something to your daughter, and you like, well, she'll get over it. Like, I gotta, you know, like, so that's very wrong-headed. So my question though is, if she's the victim, how much of a villain, a bad person, you know, like, where are we with that? Because it's complicated. Because if you are a traumatized victim, and then the things you do through the lens of all of the baggage that you're carrying, forget what we on the sidelines think. Hey, you should do this. It's your kid. You should. But like, we're dealing with all of this trauma that many generations of people have had to deal with. And I do think that is playing into the decisions. That's playing into how cold people can be to other people, especially when stuff has happened to them during childhood. You know, for those of you who don't know, you should visit axiom.app. And you'll be able to look at all of the recent videos across all of our channels. And I'm putting that on the screen right now just so y'all can see it and see what it looks like. Because there are a ton of videos that are over there. And also, I think that there are at least about 100 exclusive videos that are available for our Patreon members and our YouTube members. So, if you're interested in more of our content, as I've seen many of you binge watching, be sure to check those things out. So this is what, because I was glad that these comments made me think about this, because it's not always as it seems on the surface. Many times I'll come to the table, of course, just like, by the way, we covered the movie The Shawshank Redemption, and we had never really considered whether Andy was guilty. Then somebody in a deep dive on demand said, hey, was Andy really guilty? And then after we sat back and forgot about all that we had assumed throughout the years, we said, hey, he could have been guilty. Like, it's a good chance that he could have been. By the way, we'll link that video in the description if you missed it. But, like, that's... Yeah. You could, so your knee-jerk reaction when you give things some thought.
Yeah, but all those things, how does it play into the narrative, right? It says, dark stalker lover. That's why April, blah, blah, blah. Also the reason why she has a I don't care about anyone or anything attitude, right? But is that in the narrative of the story in the movie? What is that to the plot, right?
Well,
because she was taking, like we said in the thing, she's taking care of the kids and everything. She's doing all these things. The thing that really happens is that she is not given a chance to this good guy and you have this bad guy, right? So she cared about the other guy. It's not that she didn't care about anyone or anything. She cared enough to even take the kids in. She cared enough to take what's his name?
Manny. Yeah.
Manny in, right?
No. Was it? No, the boyfriend is Sandino.
Yeah, Sandino.
The guy she married in.
You know what I'm saying? So, and she was kind of struggling too, right?
So here's the thing, but let's not forget that she was gonna let those kids go, though. She was like, "You can't stay here now. You here for today, but you can't be here." She was also letting the man, she's the side chick of, decide that the kids can't be staying at her house where she lives, right? That was left to her. Well, they were about to, and then she changed her mind in the end. Of course, that happens.
People always make decisions like that didn't happen, though. Right? People have thought, should I do this? Should I do that? And they ultimately did not. I don't judge them based on the decision they didn't make.
Okay.
Right?
I think that's fair to actually, yeah. So not judging somebody on the contemplation, but on what their final decision is.
Yeah. But if you give me reasoning and stuff, then you're going to start getting judged on how you made those decisions. Right?
Oh my gosh. See, this is what I'm saying. But so when I look at the comments, I'm also thinking, so this gives, though, a good explanation, because see, we don't know that something happened to the sister, but look, if something happened to April, something could have happened to the sister. Like, it's perfectly reasonable to think that happened. And I think that was a good point in connection that was made in these comments here between both Chaos Spy and Dark Stalker.
But I think in the story, they're trying to provide a backstory as to the reason why the person is the way they is, not to go and indict the thing that happened necessarily, because it's not part of the story intricately in that way.
True. Now, what I would say is that...
Well, it's Tyler Perry. So
it is Tyler Perry, but what I would also say is that as a person, this is art, and I got every right to interpret the art on the basis of what I've seen, what is triggered in me, how I'm interpreted it, and all of that is done through the lens of my own personal life experience and how I see the world, right? And that's for each and every one of us. So, and I just, in case it's not 100% clear, like, I really appreciate these comments, even if there may be things we question or, seem like we're criticizing. It's really not that. We're just trying to flesh out, this versus that, and, where our opinions lie in relation to the comments. But I like that it makes us have these conversations. And, that was one of the things that Tyler Perry said about the play for this, I Could Do Bad All By Myself, was that he wanted, for the teens to be able to talk and, basically for people to have open dialogues. I think this is a good time to now look at the conversations and things that Shaquille Anderson brought up specific to Madea, because I think that this is even more gray. Like, than with the mother, because the mother was there. The mother was told that something happened to April, and the mother said, I don't believe you. That's pretty cut and dry. With Madea, we don't know if Madea knew. We can try to suppose based on, what she knew, what she should have known, like, right. Well, is the evidence all there? And you're just like, I'm minding my business. Because with Madea, it's sort of funny because there are things where Medea's like, I'm not raising no kids. I'm not doing this. But then Madea also, like you said, don't worry about the contemplations in what she's saying. What does she do in the end? And Madea does take people in the end. In the end, Madea does what she thinks is right for people and tries to, be the positive force within all of this dysfunction that's going on. So Shaquille Anderson, just as a reminder, said, what kills me about Madea is her being so gangster, because you know how Madea was pulling out the gun and stuff in the play. And she sure lets a lot of atrocities happen to the people in her family. Where was she when these kids were being abused, women getting beat, etc.? But all the performative BS with the gun, she crashes out for trivial reasons, but never seems to prevent the real issues. So go to the comments, number one, y'all. Yeah. What do y'all think about that comment? And
I think it's performative, right? A lot of people do this. You may know a lot of people who do this, right? You got people who puff up for all reasons, and just because you like that don't mean that you are in the correct position morally too, right? To even be able to say that I'm gonna do this thing if this thing happens. We talk about it all the time. Just think from years back, people be like, but why is George Zimmerman still around? But, you know what I'm saying? Like, why is so-and-so still around? Why is so-and-so and everybody so gangster and talking about, whatever issues they claim to be caring about, right? It's that same sort of thing. But also what we do know from Madea, from all of the films, all of the plays, she never actually does anything, right? She shoot up a car and she always, quote, shoot at somebody, right? Playing, because you ain't intending on hitting nobody. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And then...
Oh, and of the plays and stuff we've seen, because we may stand corrected if we haven't seen the plays where Madea just gets totally gangster. I don't know, but yeah.
But I don't... And we don't know what Madea knew, but let's assume Madea knew. Madea ain't do nothing. Like most people don't do nothing. Even if you have folks who genuinely care and stuff, it's a lot of times, what are you to do? Even when you have people who you know are victims and you think the victims are strong or whatever, and you're like, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you go to the police? Why didn't you do all these other things? Why didn't you tell somebody? It's because of those same reasons. And then if we go back to where the trauma rests upon, the cosmic turtle, right? Then what about Medea's trauma and history that would prevent her or to see a certain thing in a certain way, and then it causes a certain reaction that you're used to.
Right. And so this thread kind of went on because the next commenter, Katie Pendleton, said, I believe that Tyler Perry is reenacting how elders were back in the day. I had grandparents like that growing up, and I believe that there are quite a few people that supported the plays. They grew up with situations like this as well, in my opinion. And then, Shaquille Anderson comes back and says, I'm sorry, I just feel like that generation is full of it and are the reasons for many passed down traumas. And so to me, this is where I was like, okay, what you're saying here is like in parallel kind of to what we saw with Chaos Spy, right? In the previous comment that is kind of pointing the fingers on some level.
This must be the youngest generation or one of the younger generations right now.
I don't know. Y'all speak up in the comments and let us know. Yeah.
Because what's going to happen is the next generation is going to come.
And the next generation gonna blame you.
Yes,
for
exactly.
What? Now that's what I can tell you.
It will happen, definitely.
Yeah, because they're gonna blame you, and maybe it won't be traumas related to that. Maybe it'll be traumas related to something else. But
it's still gonna be to that too, because that is going to continue to happen. It's not like this newest generation, is wiping out these sorts of assaults,
that's true.
Then your generation is going to be blamed.
Yeah,
just like you're blaming the previous generation. Indicting an entire generation. I don't know what started these generation wars.
Well, one thing that Katie Pendleton says in just a piece of the comment that was made after that is, the notion that you're being told when you were growing up that what happens is this house stays in this house. You don't tell people outside the house and whatever. And they say that this is something they were told several times as a child. And hearing Madea say that you need to say something and get some help. And a lot of that gave me the courage to speak up and go to counseling.
But it's the nuance, right? Like,
right.
like I say, my favorite animated series is Moral Oral. He would take every episode, he would get taught a moral or something, right? And then he would go the whole episode, basically act it out. But not considering the nuance of what that means. Just because you say what happens in this house, stay in this house, doesn't mean that literally, right? It's like certain things. Just like what happens in your house right now, you're not going out telling everybody. You're deciding which things.
Right.
You do tell, you share, and you don't share.
Well, and it's such a double-edged coin, especially for Black folks in America and our history here. And the fact that certain, like you could be told that and it could be completely legitimate, right? Hey, if this is way back in the day, look, you don't be going telling people this, that, or the other. Or I think even beyond Black folks, of course, Black people could be undocumented, but when you look around the world at what's happening right now, imagine if you were undocumented and the kid went to school telling all your business. So there's reasons for protection and safety that a parent would tell a child but it doesn't mean let somebody do something to you and don't say it. But kids are not old enough to understand.
And we're talking about, in essence, I think privacy, and everyone will say that privacy is important, right?
Right.
And you teach your kids about privacy and their private parts and all of these things.
Yeah.
You don't talk about it, you don't expose it, and those sorts of things. So, but see, that's another one of those cliches. That's the problem when we have these phrases and stuff that are just straight simplified.
Teaching to the phrase and not to the concept.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's how we get here with the real villain.
Yeah.
It's because this phrase has been adopted and then shared without the context of whether you mean it verbatim or literally.
Right. And then you're hearing it as a kid, so then you could learn this mantra and, of course, you don't disobey, especially as a young child, like the discipline level is going to be on a 10. So you're not trying to push the envelope. At least most people aren't. Some people are just, little rebels. But, most kids are not going to push that and question that because they don't even have the reasoning ability at that age. But I also want to be very, very clear that because, I don't want anybody to interpret it as if we're saying that, the people who say that only meant certain things, because there are families that know stuff has gone on and have been like, well, let's keep this low. Let's not tell. Yeah. And I don't mean just, actual biological families, but then it could also be stuff that's going on in the church of a similar,
But that's how we communicate, but that's also a problem with our communication.
Sure.
That's all it is, right?
Yeah.
So,
so we have
that's why a lot of times, I read the comments and I'm just like, yeah, whatever. I don't know what they be always meaning, right? Because a lot of people, you're leaving short comments.
But just so y'all know, and I mean, this is like the second or third video that we've done over the last month or so between the channels that was sparked from a comment. So y'all leave comments. Let us know what you think. And
our Discord, right? Because I want y'all up in there talking too, because that sparks a lot of conversations.
And and in the end, we are like just human beings, just like y'all. And everything is not figured out. We are not here to be like, this is how you should be living your life. No. It's just that we're watching these videos and movies together, and then we have similar reactions sometimes, or sometimes we want to push back on reactions, and sometimes y'all push back. And I think that that's good because it makes us all consider things that we may not have considered or been willing to consider. But when it comes to, the conversation, the bottom line, as if it needed to be restated, but I'm going to do it anyway. If you think, believe your children, because, we had the whole campaign on believe your women, believe your children. And,
that's another one of those cliches.
But believe your children.
There's caveats.
Okay, so let me be specific. Believe your children regarding things like this. Now, there was an episode, and if y'all you remember this episode of Different Strokes, where because Arnold didn't like his teacher, who was being played by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Because he didn't like his teacher, he lied and said the teacher hit him. Y'all go to the comments because I know y'all remember this episode from childhood or maybe later. But, and so Arnold was lying. But the teacher was, stuff was put in place. Like the teacher was going to be fired. The teacher was going, have charges brought up. So I'm not saying that it means that, I'm not saying that it means that kids are not going to lie about stuff and do whatever because they human beings too. But what I'm saying, if somebody says something like, hey, your boyfriend is messing with me or did something to me or is looking at me funny and I'm uncomfortable, like this got to be something that you consider and just act in the...
I could rephrase it.
Yeah.
To take it serious.
That.
Right?
Yeah. Take
because
it seriously.
That don't mean you have to believe it. It ain't saying that. You just take it seriously, which would cause, quote, an investigation of some sort, right? And if I get on your nerves with the specificity and nuance in languages because I do like things like linguistics and stuff.
Oh, yeah. He's very into that. And in addition to that, like, you guys will be laughing sometimes when we communicate because, I'll say something to him one way. But what I've learned over the many years at this point is that I have to be way more specific than I used to be. So that's helped me to improve my communication. But and styles to be more specific, which also helps you to grow your vocabulary, by the way, right? Because the more words the more specific that you can be. But I just think that we have to be mindful of what we're saying and what we mean by what we're saying. And, some of the things, because I'm looking at these like being sparked by the comments, sometimes though, stuff is going to get lost in translation. Like sometimes you just have to explain it or try your best to explain it.
Yeah.
And, that's what
and sometimes in the moment you can't find the word.
Yes. And the older you get, the more that seems to happen. And what I was thinking, aside from like the idea that it's, you're getting old and there's, dementia or something like that. I just think that you're a lot more out of practice. Like when you think about when you're in an academic setting, you're growing up, going to school, throughout your elementary years and high school and then into college if you go, you're practicing on the regular. Same thing at your job. If you're working at your job and it requires a certain types of skills that keep you fresh, right? But when you haven't been practicing that and doing that, there were things that would just be second nature. I didn't even have to, I just knew them in my mind. And now, it's another thing is spelling. I'm like, oh, I was never great at spelling. But then when I'll look at a word and I'm like, that looks funny. I'm not sure if that's spelled correct. And I'm talking about words that would be fairly easy, like you just sometimes you can start to lose what you don't use in the same way. And I just think being in practice,
with English.
Yes. And being in practice, because there's just a lot of exceptions and things to remember with English, but being in practice, it helps you to maintain that, which is also why it's good for us to have these conversations. But yeah, let us know what you think. Bottom line, like you said, Heit, take it seriously when your children are telling you things. And you're going to have to also be ready for the rubber to meet the road because everybody is talking about, I don't play behind my kids. I don't play, but if there is reason to question something that could be going on with the man that's been introduced to the house or some family member, like that's a very tough situation to be in. But who going to side with the baby if you don't? So there we have it.
If you made it this far, type family business in the comments so we'll know you're one of the real ones who stick around to the end.
And be sure to check out one of the videos that's on the screen right now. And also visit axiom.app where you'll find all of our recent videos in one place so you can watch them here on YouTube. And you'll also find our merch there.